All right, Kevin, back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Riggs Eckelberry. Riggs, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show.
Kevin, it's such a pleasure, and I love the theme. I love what you're trying to do. So let's get it on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I want to start off by giving a shout out to Steve Hall because he is the one that connected us. And I had, it was such an honor doing an interview with him for the podcast. And I'll tell you what, you talk about a guy who places a very high value on relationships.
Mhm.
Steve is that guy for sure. And
Well,
and
Steve is a dear friend, both of mine, but also my wife's. She has a school here in Clearwater, and she's had both of their children in her school. And
okay.
in fact, we're going to be taking the older daughter skiing in later in March as a school trip. But we are very, very close to the Halls. But what I love about Steve is that he is totally giving of everything he knows. Like,
Yes.
okay, well, how can I help you with this, or this? And he's just this completely wide open guy. Anything he knows, he'll give it to you like that.
Yeah.
And frankly, some people get overwhelmed by that, but I'm like, give me more. Like, yeah, I we're and he'll do it, of course. And we're literally meeting at 2 p.m. this Sunday to because of course he does he's got a giant tax practice which is largely automated, but then you've got your friends, you have to do their taxes for them. But at 2 p.m. on Sunday, he has some time and we'll be discussing a new factoring instrument that he's very excited about helping to design. So there is no cooler guy on the planet, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. He has such a huge heart for service and just being of assistance and being of help to others.
Yes.
And yeah, it just comes through loud and clear with Steve. And kind of, he is just such a great representation, which is about, when it comes to relationships, which of course is what this podcast is all about and stuff.
Yeah.
So, what I'd like to do is, Riggs, I want to start. I want to turn it over to you.
Yes.
And so I want to be able to set a little bit of context and let our listeners know, who you really are and what you're all about. So I'm gonna kind of uh, what's the right word? Smush a few questions together here, but we'll just dig into it and we'll do it in a way that just it totally flows here. I promise. I mean, and so I want to start by just kind of having you share about what you do and who you serve, what inspires you most about the work you guys do and the impact you're making, and even give us a little bit of the backstory about
Mm.
how we got here, how you got into even doing the work that you do in the world.
Well, Kevin, thank you very much. So there's a series of bricks, and the first layer is my upbringing was very international because my dad was a country manager for Procter and Gamble, and so I was
Okay.
born in Canada, and then I was raised in Puerto Rico, Venezuela, Paris, Brussels, back to Paris, and finally he goes, "Okay, Riggs, we got to Americanize you," and he sent me off to school in the States, which was actually catastrophic because it was too easy for me. I got really lazy, but my schooling was it's not so much the schooling, but it was a time, the 50s and 60s, when if you were an American business person in Europe, I remember going to chateaus and riding horses to hunt and having watching Sinbad the sailor in the private screening room of the Solvay family that owns half of the Congo, all these things. And we took it for granted, right? Even though we were not those nobilities, we were not those extraordinary, well-heeled families. Nevertheless, my father, Tanner Eckelberry, was just had this tremendous ease around anything, and that I think combined with my mother's extraordinary, she was a Cliffy from Radcliffe, and she came from New York society, and you know, she could walk into a room and just dominate it, right? So that combination, and also not really having, I'm not from Cincinnati, I'm not from, Boston, I'm from all over the place. That was the first brick, and I think it was huge. And interestingly enough, it was became very valuable for my next adventure,
Okay.
because my mother and I were very interested in, well, what is the really, really interesting spiritual philosophy out there? What's the really what? Yeah, yeah. We were, high Episcopalians, went to church, all that. Like, yeah, but to call that spiritual, it's more of a ritual, right? So, putting aside rituals and this and that and the other thing. And one day I'm on vacation from prep school. I'm still in New York State, and my mom calls me up and she says, "I found it. It's called Scientology." Right now, back then, I knew people who were in India looking for the answer. They got a call from the UK. Come back to the UK because it's the Scientology is it. And back then, people were like, "Fine." It was the 60s. People said, today they go, "Well, are you sure?" "Well, I don't know." There'd be all this stuff. Back
Mhm.
then, go for it. So I got, of course, my step grandfather told me that, you're not going anywhere near that Fleabag Hotel Martinique in Herald Square, because that's not for a boy like you. But eventually I did get involved, and I had the great fortune of actually ending up on one of the legendary environments of that time, which was L. Ron Hubbard's flagship called the Apollo. And I served. And when I came on board that ship, he quickly figured out that I could wear a suit and speak languages and have that passepartout kind of go anywhere kind of thing that I inherited from my dad, right? And
Mhm.
so I was put in charge of port relations, and I'd go ashore and talk to, and I was 18 and I'm talking to governors, I'm talking to a head of state, mayors, everything, Interpol, newspapers, didn't matter. And this was a tremendous experience, because Hubbard was, and aside from the philosophy, which we won't get into, but he was a member of the greatest generation, right? And so he was born, in the just before World War One, and grew up again, kind of like me. His dad was an army captain, and so he was raised on the China Station, and then he was in Nebraska, China Station, and then Washington D.C., and this whole mixed hodgepodge. And so Hubbard was this fascinating person, and it was just really interesting to work with him. And I got such an idea of, wow, we really can do something about how people are, how happy they are, and how we can improve the world. And so I get this sense of mission. Fast forward, well, I became very good at running ships, and I ended up being a merchant
Okay.
mariner in the South Pacific, completely unrelated to Hubbard. But literally, I found myself in the South Pacific carrying around copra, which is, smoke dried coconut, all those wonderful adventures. And that kind of just, by the time 1982 hit, I had all this, I'd done 3 or 4 careers, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Then began my business, you know, learning, and I found myself in New York City, and I just launched a company in computers, and well, it was a learning experience.
Okay.
After that, I won't get into it. It was wonderful and horrible at the same time, but by the so then I kind of gave that away to my best salesman and went exploring to, how do I do better direct marketing. I even did worked in film. I did all these things, but then I hit the dot com. And the 90s was amazing for me because all of a sudden I was in my element. It was world changing. The dot com was world changing. It was fast, disruptive, bum, 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 bum. All of a sudden I was getting involved with all these exciting activities. And from 95 to 2005, I basically I became a corporate, I went up the corporate ladder
Okay.
in tech. So this gave me, so I'd had all this eclectic stuff before then, right? It was completely like, not, you couldn't be on a resume whatsoever, right? Yeah, I worked for Elwin Hubbard. Like, okay, that's on your resume? I don't think so. So, but then I was, boom, 1995 onward, I was in the tech space. And it didn't matter what your background was. If you could, move with the times and get things done. And that's year started having liquidity exits and all this fun stuff. Year 2000 hit, big crash. And, but actually things got better after that because you could build real stuff. So I arrived at 2005 and I'm taking a company as the number two. I've risen all the way up to president and COO of a company going on to the NASDAQ
Okay.
in the software space. And at that point, I joined them in 2005. By 2006, I was already restless because they were broken. They were basically broken. Their culture, I knew what they would last 5 or 6 years on the Nasdaq and they'd go away. I didn't want to be part of that. So, and that's the second major influencer in my life, which was this wonderful guy Jim Bartlett, who has for years operated a fund called Wings Fund. And I said to Jim, Jim, I think I'm ready to be a CEO. And he says, okay, fine. But you know what? We're not doing tech anymore. We're doing green. And that started me. By 2007, we had launched a company, which is the same company we have today. So almost 20 years later, same company. And I'm going to put aside the whole technology evolution that we went through and all the things to concentrate on the expertise that I gained over that period, which was how do you harness the deep desire of the everyday regular person to get something interesting and exciting investment? Because people like you and me have very poor access to, early stage, round two of Airbnb. I don't think so, right?
Mhm.
So we're stuck with the S&P 500 and Bitcoin, and then we get screwed by some stupid alt crypto. I mean, it's not a good life. And what I learned was that there's a hunger for something really exciting that is world changing and could change a person's finance with just some spare money, right? And that's what I call, retail fundraising. And so, as we were trying to do this work with this company that was to this day in the water space, very transformative. Again, don't want to veer off on that because that's a whole other conversation. But I want to focus on it became a platform for experimenting in ways to, number one, raise money, but number two, do well by those investors, right? Even if you haven't gotten to your end result, you make sure your investors aren't crammed, they aren't messed up, their portfolio is solid, and they can even sell some of it and all that good stuff. And so the care and feeding of retail investors, I guess you could say, right?
Okay.
And that became our expertise. Now in 2018, a third very important person joined my life. I'm putting aside my late wife, my current wife. That's a whole other dimension as well. But in 2018, Ken Berenger, my wonderful, wonderful top guy who really what he's what he's he knows more. What is it? He's forgotten more than we know about retail fundraising. He
Okay.
joined the company and took us to a whole new level, and not only fundraising but also creating concepts for how to go forward with a startup, and and so things started becoming very very interesting with my company Origin Clear, which is that's what Steve Hall is helping me with on Sunday is setting up a revolving fund, etc. But what we realized, Ken, myself, and this other cool guy, AJ, that we had something, we built up this sort of karetsu, the Japanese mafia, of really strong knowledge base of something that nobody knows what to do. Here's the problem we have today in this startup space, which is you can start up, friends and family, get, seed money a little bit, but then you have this huge gap until you can start pitching family offices, high net worth, et cetera, institutional. Well, what about in between? Well, number one, the VC world is falling apart. It's crashing. The stats for VC deals are going down, down, down. There there's increasing room for crowdfunding. That's companies like Start Engine and WeFunder are doing well. That's an interesting thing, but they don't do the whole thing. We, we do more, and so there's a big gap that's not really served, and people get stalled early stage, and they don't know what to do. And so what we decided to do was while I'm continuing to take Origin Clear to many layers of success because it's really more of an incubator. I'm working with Ken and AJ to export this knowledge about fundraising to help specific clients. And this company that we created together is called Takeoff Services. It's based in Pennsylvania, where the call center is for Origin Clear. And it has a loose affiliation with Origin Clear, but it's completely different businesses. Origin Clear is in the water industry. Takeoff is really about helping companies go to market. And it we have just onboarded an amazing client, amazing company that does early cancer detection using dogs.
Wow.
And the patient, so it literally detects cancer at stage zero. I mean, before it starts showing up on mammograms, et cetera. So you show up at your GP's office and you breathe into a mask. The mask gets put in a package, gets sent to Spotted Early, and they have there's all this. I mean, it's not just a dog in the backyard. You realize that, right? It's very FDA process based and so forth. And they have the dogs and they can detect four types of cancer with very high reliability. Well, and they're just coming onto the market and they are super excited about, yeah, we could go to the VCs and so forth, but we're going to give away too much. We want to retain as much as we can. And we also want to build a base of champions out there, regular people, right? And so we're doing this combined. And our talent is to combine Regulation A and Regulation D as a hybrid. Regulation A, which was invented in the Jobs Act 1983, I'm sorry, 2013, in 2013 was invented in the Obama administration. And it is a crowdfunding registration. It allows people who are not accredited to invest.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Then you have Regulation D, which is for accredited investors.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you promote either one, you're going to waste. Like if I advertise for accredited investors, 60% of my leads will be unaccredited or more.
Mm-hmm.
If I advertise for Regulation D and Regulation A investors, I will get a bunch of hotshots, accredited people in that funnel too.
Mm-hmm.
So the key is whichever offering you're promoting, you send people from one to the other, and so now you have very high efficiency on your advertising because everybody qualifies, not just the accredited investor or not just the low end investor. It's a beautiful model, and we've really refined it at again my public company Origin Clear. And we are now delivering it, for example, this wonderful company, Spotted Early, and there's more to come. We are working with, this is going to amaze you. We're working with Bob Safael, who is the producer of American Stories Entertainment, and he has had a wonderful run with a show called Surviving Man, MANN,
Okay.
and it's where this boot camp kind of thing. Well, it's in I think it's like the third or fourth season, and he goes out to the Fast. You know what the Fast channel is? Free, ad-supported streaming. Fast, it's called,
Okay.
and it's on Roku and all these like oddball.
Okay.
But
All
there's
right.
like 150 million potential views on that channel because it sort of goes everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so he's got that going, and now he's doing a show called The Raise, and it's about a company raising money, and of course, a company called Takeoff helping companies raise money.
That's
And so
awesome.
we're involved with that. That's gonna be a lot of fun. So we're doing it. We're doing that, and that's really exciting. So we think that we have a superpower, which is this ability to raise money. You cannot just do that. You got to do everything else. You got to do the marketing, the PR, the social media, the podcast, the conferences, events, everything. You got to do it all, right?
Mhm.
Don't just think you can pay for ads on Facebook or Google and actually get a lot of money in. You'll get some, but you and I know that investors, like anyone else, they want to hear about it. So if we're advertising for Spotted Early, we want the investor to go, "Oh, it's that dog thing."
Mhm.
They already heard about it, right?
Mhm.
That's a validation. It's a social proof. And so we also advise, we don't do it, but we advise our customers on, and so we have relationships with agencies, PR marketing, podcast booking, et cetera, that we that we maintain. And we don't try and make money from those. We just these are who we have as a short list that we want to bring to the clients and
Okay,
make
good.
sure they do that out of the proceeds. So as we start making money, start spending it on that. And that's a takeoff story. I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That is absolutely fascinating. And I love how you're able to capture both investors and
Right.
communicate and and identify who's who, and then just communicate effectively to both groups of investors and stuff. And so there's not the waste that is typically there and stuff. And so that's really, really powerful. So, okay, so now that we've got Riggs, I already know that there's going to be a certain percentage of folks that right now they're already like, okay, I'm really curious about some of the stuff he's talking about and would like to know more. We'll make sure that we take care of them before the end of the interview here and stuff.
Of
But
course.
I want to shift gears just a little bit because now that we've got some context set here,
Mhm.
um, I'm going to shift gears. I'm going to reiterate the question around relationships for the benefit of our listeners. So, Riggs, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And Riggs, I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Well, Kevin, thank you. Now, I believe that we run across potential life changers throughout our career, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Give an example. I was a company called Quarterdeck that started falling apart in 1996. And at that time, I was heading strategic marketing there. And a very cool guy, Subra Iyer, was in charge of biz dev there. And he said, Riggs, what product at Quarterdeck should I take? Because I can take anything I want for free. And I said, take that thing that's a screen sharing thing that they do. That became WebEx, right?
Wow. Wow.
And later, we were all doing our thing. I think it was 97, whatever. And uh, I had a chance to go work in Sunnyvale with Subra, and that would have made me a very, very different person today. I'd probably be really arrogant and so forth. But it didn't work out for mainly because I had a young boy, a baby who was born in 1998, and it just didn't come together. So, but that would have been a potential thing. And to this day, I love Subra, an amazing, amazing guy. And he built Zoom after that with Eric Yuan. So great guys, love them. They've been transformative, but they weren't transformative to me. What was transformative was, as I said before, this wonderful guy, Jim Bartlett, who, like me, has a deep philosophical base. He's with the Latter-day Saints, and he's a very deep LDS member.
Okay.
The Santa Barbara LDS crew, right? There's Utah, but there's a big contingent in the Santa Barbara area, and so he has the same sort of contemplative mentality, right? He he gives very when you ask him for feedback, he gives very thoughtful answers, and he was the guy who enabled me to become a CEO. And he had a very specific way of we're operating, which we make your company public right away, and we work with retail investors. So, 20 years later, um, almost 20 years later, we still have a relationship. He and I were corresponding over the weekend, and he has been wonderful for my venture because they gave us our first $500,000, and then money here and there. But more important than the money, because we raised far more from regular investors, is just the counsel, and he's almost like a avuncular figure for me, where I can kind of put ideas out, and he'll contemplate and go, well, I think this. What about this? And kind of give almost a father confessor kind of role, I guess you could say, but not in a
Mhm.
religious sense. So that I think he certainly altered the path because before that I had never been a CEO, right? I'd been a ship captain, but that is very different from being a CEO of a public company, believe me.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And so if you look back, uh, and I want you to get, I'm sure you can come up with a number of examples. Um, but I just want to come first thing that comes top of mind for you. If you look at your relationship with this gentleman, what is an example where you personally got to make a really substantial impact? Maybe it even surprised you a little bit when it happened. And you also know that that would have never happened if not for your relationship with this individual. What's an example of something like that, Riggs?
Well, of course, there was the beginning of my company, currently called Origin Clear,
Mhm.
which started out as Origin Oil because it was in the original oil called algae. That's a whole separate story, as I say. But there's a very significant milestone that occurred just last year with Jim.
Okay.
We had decided to take a unit we'd created called Water on Demand, which is the next big thing in water in privatized industrial water treatment, because water treating wastewater is moving away from the utilities into private hands, and it's going to be accelerated by the whole Doge phenomenon. We know it. So we'd taken that unit that does that very, very well and is already creating revenues and creating clients and so forth. And we decided to do what's called a DSPAC,
Okay.
which means that you are being merged with a special purpose acquisition company, a SPAC, a company already on the NASDAQ, and it has a bunch of money. At the time that the DSPAC that we wanted to connect with, do a union with, had $100 million in the bank.
Okay.
That was November 2022. Here we are, November 2024, and we'd hit a wall. And we'd gone through all this stuff. We'd raised a ton of money for it because you had to keep paying these fees. It's 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 a it's literally black sorcery what they do. Uh, but all of a sudden, we could not get a rise out of the SEC. We could not get responsiveness, and my theory is that it came out of them. The election, November 5th happened, and then anything that was at all complicated was just set aside because people started being worried about their jobs, and rightly so.
Mhm.
So that Thanksgiving week, I was in Mexico with my wife. She was getting stem cell treatment, and I called Jim. I go, Jim, here's what's going on. Blah blah blah. He goes, Riggs, don't try and get on the Nasdaq. Just get bought out. Just pursue getting bought out. And that wasn't the only call I made. I called my Wall Street connections, etc. But that week was when I said, you know what? We're calling off the whole merger.
Mm.
We were $12 million in
Mhm.
on that merger and we walked away from it. It was the best thing we could have done. Now, it wasn't a total loss because during those 2 years, we had actually built that unit that is now a private company on a path to, like its peers, its peers were bought out. Two companies that are in the space were each bought out for $500 million. So that's the path it's on. But the point is that Jim, he just he gave me the right. I knew that I had to do something,
Yeah.
but he
Yeah.
gave me the path, and he again that contemplative thing. And I'll tell you the holiday. Then of course all hell broke loose because then we had to work with a couple hundred investors who were in this and completely restructure it. And fortunately, we have very good investors, and they were supportive. But so it was a very, very busy holiday season. But it started with that fateful call on, Thanksgiving Wednesday of last year.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And that's really incredible. And like, what an inspiring story this is. And Riggs, my goal for this podcast hasn't changed one bit since the day that we launched this. And it's twofold. I want to give my guests, such as yourself, the opportunity to just share your story and your experience around this topic of relationships. And in so doing, I want to inspire our listeners who are also entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs. I want to just inspire them to place an even more intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable relationships in their own lives. And, with your help today, Riggs, we have certainly achieved that. And so I want to thank you for that. For anybody that's listening to this, and thinking like, man, Kev, I really appreciate Riggs. I love how he shows up and he shared some really interesting things. I'd like to find out more about what they're doing and how can we go about doing that? Any websites, any resources we can share with folks?
No, none whatsoever. So the mother company, Origin Clear, people are welcome. We do a monthly, um, it's called Legends of Water. It's a broadcast we do, and third Thursday of every month. So tonight, the 20th, we're doing a show.
Okay.
And so we communicate a lot of what's going on. And so sign up for that show, go to originclear.com, you'll get the invitation. If you're
Okay.
interested in investing, there's a green invest now button. This unit, water on demand, it's transforming. That's riding this unicorn wave of industrialized water treatment being privatized. That's cool too. Waterondemand.net. If people are interested in either becoming a client of Takeoff or becoming an associated resource, then just go to takeoff to succeed, digit two,
Uh-huh.
takeoff2succeed.com.
Okay.
And right there, boom, you'll there's a book a consultation, and we'll be happy to talk to you about that. And so what I'm so happy that you've concentrated on this, because what I love is the fact that we do have these pivotal relationships. And personally, I think that Stephen Hall will become what that for me. And we've worked on that for a long time. 5 years ago, we met um, at a in Clear Lake, Northern California, and we were literally talking about the stuff we're doing today. And we both moved to Clearwater. We moved our families together and so forth. I believe that will be pivotal, and I look forward to another transformative experience with Stephen Hall. And I have to say, Kevin, you do a heck of a job pulling that stuff out.
Well, I appreciate that. And that is, I love facilitating introductions that lead to meaningful relationships and financial impact. It is just it's it's a gift that I've had for many years. It's what Dan Sullivan of Strategic Coach calls my unique ability, and the more I just lean in to using that and becoming as effective as I can at using that ability. I'll tell you, man, we get to facilitate some pretty big deals these days, and I am incredibly honored by the entrepreneurs that I get to surround myself with and serve, and they're just so inspiring because they're making such an impact in this world, and so yeah. Um, well, once again, thank you so much, Riggs, for taking the time to have this conversation today. I am really excited to get this out and share it with a lot of other entrepreneurs. And so, yes, thank you again. Really appreciate you, Riggs.
Kevin, thank you again, and all the best of luck. I hope that you become ever bigger as a podcast.
Well, thank you.